I believe the biggest misconception is that I am only helping them plan for the eventuality of their death. A case lands on my desk, and it was a prisoner alleging that they were sexually assaulted by a guard as the guard was confiscating a banana out of the prisoner's pants. We disinherited the successful child so that more of the funds can go to the other child. Experience in government, if you can get it, is an excellent start for a young attorney. My reaction as an 18-year-old was, no, that's old people law. That's law for old people.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Czubernat, a personal injury attorney and your host. Today, I am joined by my friend, Agnes Ptasznik, an estate planning attorney with a wealth of experience in government representation and consumer fraud litigation. We're going to dive into the world of estate planning, share some behind-the-scenes insights, and discuss what really matters when it comes to legacy and life decisions. Agnes, you spent almost 2 decades in government before jumping into a private practice in estate planning. Was this always on your mind?
It's just how life happens. So I was hired by the Attorney General at that time, Lisa Madigan, to be the outreach liaison to the Polish community. This was a non-attorney role. So that was my start into government. And the reason I took that job was not that it was my dream to be the outreach liaison person, but I already had an interest in the law. And being a daughter of immigrants, not having any family members that were lawyers or friends of my parents were not lawyers, I knew that I needed to get my foot in the door somewhere to get that experience before I spent so much money on law school and took out any loans. I wanted to make sure that this is what I want to do. So that was my way of getting my foot in the door. And then I'll explain more later, of course, but that started my career in the law. First as a non-attorney, then I went to school. Once I received my license, I stayed on as an attorney at the Attorney General's office and began my career there through many different kinds of positions within the Attorney General's office.
If I ran into an 18-year-old Agnes and told her what you do now, how do you think she would react?
She would be very surprised. She would have told you there's no way that she would be in estate planning because as an 18-year-old, she was actually faced with the proposition by her parents that maybe this is an interesting field. And my reaction as an 18-year-old was, no, that's old people law. That's law for old people. And lo and behold, life twists and turns. And here I am as an estate planning attorney and absolutely loving it.
So did your parents recommend law school and a career in the legal field, or did they precisely recommend an estate planning?
No. My parents listened to a lot of Polish radio, and there are many different hosts. They had many different kinds of guests, and my parents liked to listen to an attorney who was a probate and estate planning attorney that spoke on Saturday mornings, and they liked the way that he spoke and what the stories that he told and how he explained to the community about the need for estate planning, the value of it. And so they understood it. And that's why when they knew I was interested in a career in the law, they thought it would be a wonderful fit. If you don't want it to, it doesn't have to have very demanding hours. It allows for flexibility for a female if she wants to have a family and children. And I think that was the perspective that my parents had when they made that recommendation.
What's the biggest misconception that people have about your job and your role as an estate planning attorney?
I believe the biggest misconception is that I am only helping them plan for the eventuality of their death. What I am actually doing through a complete, comprehensive estate plan is helping them establish a plan in the eventuality that they lose capacity, be it they are unfortunately in a bad accident, and they are in a coma or just don't have the capacity to make sound financial decisions, sound healthcare decisions. So we're planning for either one's incapacity or then later one's death and how should their assets be distributed, what wishes do they have for their family, for their friends, for charities? What do they want to happen to their legacy, be it their financial and their memory? How do they want to memorialize that?
Do people avoid estate planning because maybe they don't want to think or discuss death, or is there something deeper going on?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yes, people have a fear of talking about death. It is an uncomfortable topic. I believe we are both Polish, so I'll just talk about maybe our roots and our community. I don't know if you have felt the same with your family, but this happens in my family and I see it through my clients. So generally through our community, I think there is a superstition that if one talks about their death, that they are somehow willing it to happen. But just because you are talking about it and preparing for it doesn't mean that you're asking for it. It is so important. And if I can pass on one message, is that, and this is what drives me to do what I do and what brings me such satisfaction, is the peace that clients walk away with when they have signed and established their estate plan.
If you had to start again from scratch, no law degree, no connections, what would you do?
If I had to start again, and let me clarify, am I in college? Am I in high school?
Let's say you're still in high school.
If I was still in high school, I would do what I did before, continue to explore what my passions are, what I enjoy, try different things. And I'll give you an example of what I had the fortune to do in high school. So my high school allowed for us to do internships and they guided us. So in high school, I was actually interested in architecture. They set me up with an architectural firm that allowed me to come one day a week for about 2-3 hours. And I very quickly realized after doing the work that I am a much more social person than many of the architects that I was working with. That work requires a lot of time at the computer, a lot of drawing, programming, math. And I liked math and I liked drawing. I have an artistic side, but I have a calculatory side, if I can call it. But I never thought of that social component when it comes to architecture. So I felt this is interesting, but not that interesting enough for me. Then I wanted to be a medical professional. I thought to be a doctor. And actually in college, I took some pre-med courses. And after taking all those courses, I still have much appreciation for medical students and those that go into the medical field. But I also had the realization that I would like to have a family, have that balance in life much earlier in life than going through so much schooling and so much training. One part of it is the theory, what you read about a certain career, what you know, but another is to actually try it. And yet another component is to learn about yourself as you're growing, because you are different as an 18-year-old. You are different as a 22-year-old. You're different as 30 and you're different at 40. Because life changes you, experiences change you, and you just don't know what life will throw at you, what experiences will come your way and shape your path.
That is a great answer. And shockingly enough, in law school 10 years ago, I didn't have a Facebook because I was concerned about my privacy.
And here you are, social media king.
and here I am posting on social media very often. So yes, it's very interesting how things change. But I really like the idea of exploring and trying to figure out if this is for you. That's something I hear from not only high school students, even lawyers. They think they want to do certain type of practice. But when I ask them, have you gone to lunch with any of the attorneys that you want to be like? No. Shouldn't you maybe consider inviting them for coffee or for lunch and talk it over? They may like it, but you may hate it. So wouldn't you rather know now than later?
I absolutely agree with that. So I will add on to my answer. So I would have not changed continuing to experience and be open to be adaptable to career changes and switching things up. But I agree with your recommendation. I would have spoken to more professionals, gone to lunches, gone to coffees, asked for more help. I was shyer than I am now as a younger person. So don't be shy if I can make that recommendation. Ask. The worst thing someone can say is no. Most likely they're not saying no because they're not mean. It's not that they don't want to. They might be a very busy professional. They might not be able to. So just try someone else.
It actually comes up quite often on my podcast, in my episodes, the value of networking and building relationships and actually enjoying what you're doing. As law students, we rush through the law school. We go from one exam, one semester to another without giving it much thought. And all you want is to graduate.
Get it over with.
Get it over with, exactly. And then you get it over with and then you realize, well, the life may not be all that much better at that point. You're going to get a full-time job. You're going to work long hours and maybe it was better in law school.
I agree with that. You should take your time in law school, network with your friends, because you'll find later on when you are out there in the real world, your friends are also out there in different careers, in different paths, either in government, in private practice, in small firms, mid-sized firms, larger firms, maybe in other states, in other countries. And the bigger network you have, the more valuable you are to your book of business, to your firm's book of business, to your clients.
And it's easier to produce podcasts and have guests that are willing to participate.
That too.
Law school should prep you for the real world of practice. How much of it actually does?
I think law school programs do their best to prepare law students. Of course, it would be a utopia to think that all students are 100% prepared for the real world. The way law school prepares you, it gives you the tools when it comes to how you research, the basics that you need from your courses, from your contracts to property, to knowing civil procedure. You need to know those basics and be exposed to those basics, but you're also not finishing law school knowing everything, but having those basic tools, right, of knowing how to research, how to write. You need to know where to find the answer. You don't need to know the answer all the time. And so when you're out there then as a practicing lawyer, as a young lawyer, that's usually what you're being asked to do by your bosses, by the partners. You're given research projects, most likely in your first, second, third year. And that's what they expect you to know how to do. Where do I start to look for the answer? Am I looking at the right resources? Am I looking at the primary resources, right? And that's one of those valuable tools. The other is the hard work and the commitment. You need to know how to delay gratification. If you've got exams, if you've got papers due, you've got to set some of your private life aside, right?
Your priorities need to change for that time being.
Exactly. And that's another tool that prepares you for your career. A predominant amount of the legal jobs out there, attorney jobs out there, especially for beginner associates, are very demanding hours, very demanding billable hours. And that is just another test. Are you willing to put in the time and put in the effort, just like you were in law school?
What do you think law school should teach that it does not?
I don't think law school is producing marketing agents and business savvy lawyers. That is something that I know at least my firm has helped with development in associates. And so you need to learn how to network. Who are good referral sources for your area of the law? But I wouldn't worry about that as a young starting associate in your first or second year, unless you're opening up a practice right out of law school.
Which is probably not the best idea.
Agreed. Go and get the experience first, right? And when I say experience, I'm not talking in years. I'm talking in actual hours of work that you are committing and learning. And that depends from person to person, right? How many hours are you willing to dedicate to that craft and learn? And so once you have those, I'm going to say thousands of hours under your belt, then you not only have the theory from school, but you've got the practice. You've got the multitude of examples in your area of the law. And with that understanding and practice under your belt, Then you can go out there and you can educate. And as part of the education, you are marketing, you are promoting yourself and your area of the law. I finished law school a very long time ago. No one was podcasting when I was finishing law school. So it's not something that law school could teach me. And it's not something that I blame the school for, right? That it wasn't even in existence.
I think as a law student, you need to realize that the law school will give you tools, but will you have all the tools to get the job done?
No, you are constantly learning.
Exactly. And going back to the hours of experience that you said, I think the best way to shorten that period would be to increase the intensity. Same way as going to gym, right? You can be going to a gym every day for the whole year, but if you just walk around the gym and sip your smoothie, that's probably not going to give you the results you want.
Correct. But if you're putting in hours, those results will appear faster.
Have you ever had a case or a client that made you question everything that you do as a lawyer?
I'm not sure if I questioned everything that I do as an attorney, but there came a moment in my first career as an attorney where I realized I think I reached the end of the road when it comes to this area of the law, and I'm ready for the next challenge. So my first area of the law that I practiced in when I finished law school and passed the bar and became an attorney was government representation. And specifically what that means is in the Attorney General's office, there is the area of government representation, which is further split up into two groups that defend different departments within the state. And so I was specifically assigned to defend the Department of Corrections, so our prison system. And if you may not know, the prisoners within the prison system here in Illinois can sue the prison system either through the warden, through the guards, or any other employee, saying that they are being wronged in some way. And they can file suits in federal court. They're called 1983 actions. Or they can file suits in state court, and those are called mandamus actions.
What are some of the complaints that those prisoners may have?
Predominantly, they're complaining about the conditions that they live in. They're complaining that it's too cold or it's too dirty or they're not getting enough of certain supplies or materials or like the ticketing system. And so in fairness, we always, as attorneys on the other side, the defense side, take a look into the action. There's also if there was any retaliation or physical altercation or medical care, are they getting adequate medical care? So I'm not saying that these cases don't have merit. Some had merit, and we would take care of them and settle them appropriately. But many times these prisoners don't have much to do when it comes to entertainment, and they like the challenge. Filing a suit and doing the research got them out of their cell. They were able to go to the library, and they also found it as a financial incentive to perhaps get money from the state for a settlement. So that's also what drove a lot of these cases. And leading into my end of my third year, and I'm already in a relationship with my husband. We're already talking about starting a family. So I already have that in the back of my mind. And I already have a lot of depositions under my belt, a lot of trials under my belt. So I have that experience that I wanted, that drove me to want to be in litigation and ask for that job. I asked for this, okay? I wanted to get that litigation experience. A case lands on my desk, and it was a prisoner alleging that they were sexually assaulted by a guard as the guard was confiscating a banana out of the prisoner's pants because he was trying to steal it out of the chow hall. That was my moment of, Agnes, it's time for a career switch. And that's what I did. I placed a request within our office to move to consumer fraud, where I would get experience helping consumers, residents in the state of Illinois, but also from a different perspective. So I was now then changing from a defense role, defending suits, to becoming an actual prosecutor and more on the prosecutorial side of reviewing consumer complaints, investigating businesses for deceptive practices, but talking to consumers and helping them out in their day-to-day problems, from auto fraud to other deceptive practices where they bought something or a service and they didn't get what was promised. And to the average person, it's a big deal when they can get help and get even a couple $100 back. And that just gave me a newfound satisfaction in what I was doing as an attorney that I had lost along the way with the cases that I was dealing with.
This is similar to the feeling I get when I represent somebody who was injured in an accident, and I know I can make a real difference in somebody else's life.
And don't get me wrong, I appreciate my 3 years in government representation. I think it formed me into an excellent lawyer, if I may say, because it gave me such excellent practice. So I don't want to at all discourage any young attorneys, any law students from pursuing a position or experience within government. I think it's an absolute wonderful start. I was literally sent to court my second week on the job, to federal court on my second week on the job, where I am sitting there as a 2-week-old attorney with partners from huge law firms, because that's who's appearing in federal court. So I also had that experience of having them as opponents, and they, of course, brought their associates. And taking depositions and responding to interrogatories and motion practice. I wrote so many motions to dismiss and motions for summary judgment. So please don't take my answer before as like a distaste. It was just, I'm just responding to that moment in my life and what happened and what caused a career switch. But I do want to clarify that experience in government, if you can get it, is an excellent start for a young attorney.
And we talked about it earlier during our discussion. I started my law firm right out of law school. But would I recommend that other people do it? Probably not. Just because it was a good fit for me, it doesn't mean it will be a good fit for you. Same goes with the government job or certain fields or practice area like the prison situation you described. Somebody else may love it. You, on the other hand, loved it until a point in time and then decided to make a switch. And that is great that you were able to notice that and know what you want. And I believe that's a big message that I'm trying to convey to current law students. Know what you want and make sure it makes you happy.
Correct. And if you don't, again, go and get experience, get different experiences. Ask someone if you can shadow them. Can you work for a few weeks? Can you work for a few months with them to see what the reality is of their job day to day?
You help people plan for the future. What's something about life that people don't realize until it's too late?
You are absolutely treated as an adult when you turn 18 years old. And there are many other privileges that you get as an 18-year-old. But one of those privileges is that you are in control of your own financial decisions and your own healthcare decisions. What am I trying to say? Just because you have parents, or later on in life, just because you're married and you have a spouse, does not give those people that you have those relationships with an automatic right to help you in situations where you can't make those decisions. As an adult, you need to empower those people or anyone that you want to be able to make those decisions should there come a time where you're unable to make a medical decision for yourself because you're in a coma, because you had a bad accident, or again, because you are in a coma, bills need to be paid, tax returns need to be signed. Life still goes on, even though your health is on pause, right? So people can't automatically take care of those things for you unless you permit them to do that. So how do you do that? The simple answer is through powers of attorney. There are 2 powers of attorney for those living here in Illinois, a power of attorney for healthcare and a power of attorney for property. And after this show, there's no excuse for anyone listening to not put in place at least those 2 basic documents so that if something were to unfortunately happen to you, you have empowered at least 1, or I would say 2 people in the least, to be able to help you out if an emergency arises.
As a personal injury attorney, I see it quite often that people come to me and they want to hire an attorney. For example, the conversation goes like this. Counsel, one of our relatives had an accident and we would like to hire you to represent him. Well, you can't really hire me to represent somebody else. You can hire me to be your own attorney, but that person, that injured person, has to hire me himself. But he's in a coma. Well, that's where the problems start, because if there's no power of attorney in place, then really nobody at this time is authorized to make any decisions on behalf of that person, let alone hire an attorney. And even if you were to hire an attorney, let's say there's a release or a check that comes from the insurance. Who's going to sign the release on behalf of the injured person? Who's going to sign the check? Who's going to cash it? So had that person had the power of attorney, it will be an easy process or somewhat easy process. Without that, you just have to go to court and go through the guardianship proceeding.
Exactly, which is often much more costly and more time consuming.
And it's another layer of complexity and issues that you're already dealing with. You already have a relative in a hospital. You're already dealing with emotional and medical situation. And now you have a legal situation on top of it, all layered and stacked back to back.
Exactly. So in my practice, if I have a couple or even a single parent, if I see that they have young adults, so their children have reached 18 years of age, I also have that discussion that we should put in place powers of attorney for their kids. Because to take it yet a step further, kids these days, as in the past and now, are also going to college in other states. And in the event something were to happen, the parents, I recommend, should have a protection in place, a safeguard in place, that in the unfortunate event, something happens to that child, they have the paperwork in place to be able to help them out, to travel to college, or even if it's local, and help their children out. And those powers of attorney can be amended through their life. So then later, when they meet their partner, they can change out their parents for their partner or other close friends. Again, as I mentioned before, these documents can be changed throughout your life, but have them in place, have something in place. That's my most crucial request.
I must ask, how many 18-year-olds are contacting you because they want an estate planning document?
None. I work through their parents.
Do people get wiser with age, or are they just getting stuck in their ways?
I think it's both, if I can take that option. Again, life experiences make you wiser, because once you've experienced something, you hopefully learn from that experience. But I think with age, we get accustomed to certain ways that we've set for ourselves. You might lose patience more quickly as you age. You don't have as much patience for things that you're not interested in. So I think when you suggest that maybe people are just set in their ways, I think they might just be sometimes tired from dealing with people they're not interested in or topics they're not interested in, and just avoid them and not deal with them. So I think that's a result of age. I think you also, with age, realize the more you age, right, the less time you have left. So you'd rather focus on what brings you joy and just not dealing with the negativity or things that you don't think you need to deal with.
It's not that I don't have time. I have time, but my priorities are constantly shifting, right? As you're growing, as you're aging, your priorities change. So I try to spend the time where the priorities are. So it's more, maybe not that I don't have the time. It's just I choose not to waste time on certain things.
I agree. And you most likely focus on the things, as you said, priorities. You focus on the things that are important to you, and you reassess what is important to you at that given time in your life. Sometimes it might be business development. Sometimes, hopefully, you have too much business, and you're in a point in your life where you're saying, you know what? Now I need to focus on my health or on relaxation or more time with family, whatever it may be. It can be constantly shifting, and that's okay.
You help people plan for what happens after they're gone. Has that changed how you approach your life?
My clients' wishes have shaped how I've adapted my own estate plan and how I approach my own life and how I deal with my own family. I'll give you an example. In the Illinois healthcare power of attorney, you make a decision as to whether you allow the person that you name as an agent or successor agent to essentially to be able to pull the plug or not if you were to be in a permanent vegetative state. I had a client who has a child with a severe special need. And the child, from what I understand, only recognizes her. And when it came to make that choice, she said, I absolutely have to be on life support for as long as I can be. And even if I'm a vegetable in the house, in that bed, but I have to be there because I am his constant. But I came home and I had a follow-up conversation with my husband. Because at first I had told him, it's expensive to stay on life support. So I don't want you to bankrupt the family. Take me off after X amount of weeks. And that client interaction had me have a follow-up discussion with him and say, it's not about what I want. I have 2 young girls. And at this point, if something were to happen to me, it's what they need. It's what the kids need. Do they need to see me, even though I'm not responsive, not reacting? At some point, I imagine it would be creepy and they don't need it. They don't need to see me. And then it's time to let go. But it's not what I want. It's not what he wants. For me, I think it's the most important what the children need. So that's how my clients have shaped me and my decisions.
If you found out tomorrow was your last day, what's one thing that you would regret not doing?
I value my work. I love my work, but I wish I had more time to travel and just to experience. I'm just going to say experience, experience restaurants, experience shows, experience destinations. And I do that. Don't worry, it's not like I don't do it at all, but I would do more.
That is a fascinating answer. And this reminds me of some of the conversations I have with my friends. And when we were younger, we wanted to have things. Now we want experience. And in a list of the things that you would want to do more, it wasn't, I would want a bigger house. I would want a bigger or newer car. You didn't mention that. So it's interesting how yours and apparently my priorities have changed from things to experiences.
That's true. I didn't say that. I did like things. I still do like things. It's great to experience that too, to drive a great car, get a great purse, have a nice pair of shoes. I'm a girl. I enjoy those things too. But they're just things. They can get destroyed like this. But the memory of that experience lives on.
You've been in government sector and now in private sector in estate planning. Which sector has biggest personalities and wildest characters?
In government, it's very interrelated with politicians, right? So you will always at the top have those who have political aspirations and are either not appointed but voted in, right? And have had to be dynamic and charismatic to be voted into office. You have those that have political aspirations, so they are trying to be standout rock stars in the workforce. But you'll also find that in private practice. You've heard of the term rainmaker, right? So you've got those that are distinguishing themselves not just with their knowledge, but with the book of business that they bring in, that they are developing the connections that they make and all the business that they bring in. Sometimes, your rainmaker might be just too wild for that client relationship, and that's why they're only bringing in the business. And there's other attorneys who take over and do the day-to-day client management. Some attorneys can do both. And some attorneys are introverts and they prefer to just do their research and their writing, and that is okay. And we need those too.
What's the worst piece of legal advice that you've heard somebody else give?
I've had clients come to me, prospective clients come to me, where a family member has passed away. They have a will in their hand and they say, for example, Mom left me the house in this will. I took it to a real estate agent and they said, you can't sell the house. You need to have letters of administration. And they're like, what is this? Well, you need to see a probate or estate planning attorney. Whoever prepared that will for them did not have the proper expertise or did not explain to the client that through this process of just drafting that provision into a will, although that house will eventually pass to the son, it will require opening a probate proceeding, which is much more costly and takes more time than if they had a proper estate plan in place, either through a transfer and death instrument or through a trust. And so that's where I believe either there was poor communication or poor advice. This exact situation happens often. And I do take the time to see who prepared these instruments, these wills. It's often attorneys whose primary area of practice is not estate planning.
What I want people to understand that a will, a trust is just a document. That's why you should carefully choose the attorney that you're working with to make sure that not only you have the right document that correctly reflects your wishes, but you can actually update the document and you know what to do with the document once the time comes and you actually have to put it to use.
In my practice, when I prepare documents for clients, that is just, I want to say, one half of the process. So when we actually sign those documents, I'm typically telling my clients, congratulations, you have an estate plan, but you are only halfway there. And they look at me, but I reassure them and say, but now your homework starts. And part of the process is giving them instructions and helping them with what to now do with their estate plan, what to do with their trust. And so, as you said, a trust is just a document, and it really means nothing if you then don't do your homework. What do I mean by doing your homework? If you own property, that property should be titled in the name of your trust. If you own a business, if allowed, your business should be owned by your trust. Your larger bank accounts, investment accounts, life insurance, where appropriate, needs to be titled to your trust. So the one part of my job is to understand what documents you need, prepare them, sign them correctly with the appropriate witnesses and notaries. The second part is to advise you, along with if you have a financial advisor or another wealth manager, on how then best to fund your trust and arrange those assets that make sense with the plan that you have. Because it's, again, one thing to have a plan in place, but if you don't do that second part, you're going to end up in probate anyway. And all of that time, effort, and money that you paid for the preparation of your will and of your trust was a waste because your family is still going through the procedure, the process, the expense, and the time of probate. And it defeats the purpose of having created that plan in the first place.
You've helped people shape their legacies. So what really makes a life meaningful?
The definition of that and the answer to that is dependent on the person. What I see through my clients, what is most meaningful to them, depends on their walk of life and their family circumstance. I have individuals who never found a life partner or never had children. So for them, their legacy is leaving to either organizations they've started that support meaningful causes to them, and that is their legacy. For parents, their legacy is their children, and they want to leave for their children. If they live a long and beautiful life and they have grandchildren or great-grandchildren, their legacy is not just their children, but all of their descendants, and they want to leave something or leave funds for college educations or sometimes travel opportunities. So for each client, it's something different. And I love learning what that is and helping them memorialize it.
How often do you see parents disinheriting their children?
I see it on a weekly basis, but it may surprise you that it's not always negative. Yes, there are fallouts and children choose to walk away from relationships, move away, not cultivate a relationship. Perhaps sometimes the parent had something to do with, I'm going to call it the disintegration of that relationship. But sometimes it's positive. Sometimes the child is wildly successful and doesn't need the money and has a sibling who could use the money. So that child is purposefully disinherited. But we like to stress that it's not for lack of love and attention, but for reasons such as success or financial, sustenance. And so we disinherit the successful child so that more of the funds can go to the other child.
When parents disinherit their children for a reason, let's say, is there any common trend, any common reason that comes up quite often?
I would say just the relationship has fallen apart. And so the parent values their hard work, their money, and wants to redirect those assets towards something else, someone else, or something else. When I say something else, like a charity.
You've worked with numerous fraud cases, consumer deception cases. Do you believe people are naturally good, or is everyone just looking out for themselves?
I do believe we are inherently good. I think the bad that happens is shaped by other bad influences, but I think at the core, we are good. And even if in the process one becomes bad, if you are good at the core, you can return to that good.
What's one thing that people obsess over that truly doesn't matter?
One thing that I see people obsess over is what they have and showing off what they have to others, be it, I have this kind of a house, I have this car, I'm wearing this, I'm, going here, going there. And it's more so going back to the whole, what I have when it comes to those items, the stuff. And that stuff really doesn't matter. Sometimes I will, of course, treat myself or will say, I like those shoes, but not yet. But if I do this, this, and this, then I'll buy them. But I'm buying them as a motivating factor or as a treat, I reached a goal as a reward for myself, for my own enjoyment, but not to show off or impress someone else.
You juggle being a parent, a wife, a busy attorney. What's one rule you swear by that keeps you from losing your mind?
I'm often on the brink. I will admit that. The rule that I have to keep reminding myself, an approach, is that even though we use the word balance often, right? That you should have a good work-life balance. I treat it more so as a myth, but I still like to refer to it but more so like on a children's playground, like a seesaw. That seesaw never really reaches an equilibrium. It's constantly in motion. So that's how you should see it. I'm the working mom, but I'm also parent and wife. And it's constantly in flux. And there are weeks where my job is more demanding. There's just deadlines and more work, and I have to spend more time working. But then there are weeks where there's just more school events, more homework, more recitals, dance recitals, piano recitals. So the reality is more time gets spent with family and less at work.
Do you think there are unique advantages that mom attorneys bring to the profession compared to their male counterparts?
A mom is a super manager because she has to manage her own schedule and the schedule of every other person in her household. The more one has to manage, the more they can manage in their life. And having that family and those responsibilities is no longer seen as a distraction, but as an attribute of what you bring in, that multitasking, that ability to be able to handle so many things. But in my field, like estate planning, I have a better connection with mothers, with parents, because I understand.
I'm certain in your practice you deal with multicultural families, and I understand that your own family is also multicultural.
That's correct. So, although I was born here, my parents are both immigrants from Poland. And so I grew up in a Polish household speaking Polish. It was my first language, even though, again, I stress I was born here, but my first language is not English. I did not learn English until I was 5 years old before I started kindergarten. I fell in love with my husband, who is German-born, so from Germany, but I met him here in the United States after he had lived here for a while. And our relationship works because he values what's important to me. So when we were dating more seriously and we were talking about life goals, and one of my goals was to have children, I had stressed because I have a close relationship with my parents. And growing up, I had always told my parents, I can't promise you I'll marry a Polish guy, but I will promise you that your grandkids will speak Polish to you. That I can promise because it was important to me. I valued speaking the language. I think it gave me an advantage in this country. It continues to give me an advantage in my practice. And so I value that. And he also values how important it is to me. So he is understanding and patient in that he has no problem that I speak to the kids when I'm having one-on-one conversations in Polish. He supports them going to Polish school on Saturdays. He even drives them many times, picks them up. They are also in Polish dancing. He's also doing a lot of the driving. He is packing the lunches for Polish school. He's also making sure they have their dance shoes. They're all Polish related, not even American and not even German related. But he understands that it's important to me. He understands that the children enjoy it and that it's important to them and it's part of their identity. But vice versa, it's also important for him that his German heritage is passed on. So he also speaks German to them. His German traditions are also celebrated in the house. We also travel to Germany to expose our children to the German culture and have a very close relationship with his parents, his brother. So the kids are exposed to both cultures.
Is there anything that multicultural families should watch out for when considering their estate plan?
That's a good question. Yes. If a multicultural family has assets in another country. So, for example, in our situation, if my husband had assets in Germany, and if I have an asset in Poland, let's say I have an apartment in Kraków, my advice is always to seek counsel in that country, because I am an attorney licensed in Illinois and can advise from the American, but more specifically, Illinois perspective. And the plan I prepare is for U.S. assets. I could reference that there's worldwide assets, but it governs your U.S. assets. You should have a plan in each country where you have assets to govern those assets in that country. Because countries have different forms of law, different approaches to estate planning, to taxes. Some have inheritance taxes, some have estate taxes, some don't. For example, some countries have different forms of what kind of estate planning documents or tools are allowed. For example, Poland does not recognize the concept of a trust. So because the laws are so differing country from country, I advise clients to find an attorney that practices in that country, and will give them advice on what to formulate for the assets that they have. However, what's very important, I would like to know when the client establishes a will or a trust in another country, because it's crucial to incorporate that information into the plan that you have in the United States. Because we typically, in the United States, draft our wills to start with the following sentence. This is my last and final will. I revoke any prior wills. So if I have that sentence in my American will and nothing else, and then I fly to Poland and I have a similar will prepared by a Polish attorney that says, this is my last and final will, and I revoke all my prior wills, one could argue that my Polish will revokes my American will. I have a solution to that, and I typically have the American will recognize other wills and say that they need to work together and should not revoke each other.
What would you say to those who think that estate planning is only for old people or millionaires?
That is a common misconception. Estate planning is needed for all. We all come from different walks of life, and I hope that through my answers, I've explained why everyone needs some form of estate planning, from the 18-year-old who should have powers of attorney to the elderly person who needs to have their affairs in place so that the family is not going through an extensive probate proceeding. But also for the individual who has a few assets to protect those assets so that their estate is not dwindled down because of a guardianship proceeding, because they also didn't have the proper documents, the proper POAs in place. To the individual who has a business or many holdings of real estate. Everybody needs some form of estate planning.
What about the objection that I hear often? I don't need an estate planning attorney because I have no assets or I have little assets.
It's not just about the assets, but it's about having documents in place to name people that you trust to help you out if the time comes when you need help. And that has nothing to do with assets. But an estate plan is really a set of documents that assists an individual during their life and after their death. It assists you during your life in the event that something happens and you need to empower someone else to make decisions for you when it comes to your healthcare and to your finances. After your death, you need to memorialize what you want to happen to what is left behind when it comes to your property. And when I say property, I'm not talking about just real estate. Even if you don't have real estate, you probably have a bank account. You probably have a vehicle or some other items that might be meaningful to you. And you may have a specific intention to leave it to a specific individual. And if it's not properly documented and witnessed and notarized according to the rules of the state that you live in, it'll pass through the laws of that state. That's why I'll stress again, even though one might think that estate planning is just a will or that estate planning is just for millionaires, it's more than that. It is more documents, but they're all designed to help you in the event you lose capacity during your life, but also a plan in place for what you have and what happens after you've passed away.
Thank you again for accepting the invitation and appearing on this podcast. And I really hope that our audience finds this discussion about estate planning and everything else that relates to it as insightful as it was to me.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be the first female guest invited on this show.
Yes, you are.
I appreciate all of your questions, your well thought out questions. It was so fun to talk to you and to just relive all the chapters of my life. But I appreciate that you want to pass on a message to not only the law students in your audience, your clients, your friends, but the community at large. I hope that all audience members were able to get some nugget of information. What I have to say is not revelational. It's not earth-shattering, but I hope to some degree it helps resonate with each audience member. So again, I thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege. I appreciate it.
If you want to learn more about Agnes and her work, I have included all the links in the video description, so check that out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell icon so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.